Many breaking news today as we come on the air. Hi and very warm welcome at Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Following news headlines have been reported by world major English news channels and news agencies. So please watch it.
Today, millions bracing for impact as Cyclone Alfred hurtles towards the east coast.
It is serious and it is happening, and we want Queenslanders to be prepared.
The US suspends military aid to Ukraine while Anthony Albanese leaves the door open to Australian boots on the ground. New South Wales public schools to get a $5 billion funding boost under the National Schools Agreement, leaving only Queensland not on board. And trade war fears the Trump administration's tariffs to come into effect in the coming hours. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson, coming to you from the land of the Durham people.
Tonight, breaking news, we're tracking this new major cross-country winter storm. 115 million Americans on alert for dangerous driving, blizzard conditions, high winds from the Midwest to the South, the Great Lakes right to the East Coast, and the real tornado threat tonight we're also watching. Ginger Z is standing by to time out this storm. Also tonight, the new images here, the wildfires burning out of control in South Carolina.
Well, we can't get out.
More than 175 fires still burning tonight. Families racing to escape the flames. Tonight, the stock market dropping more than 600 points after President Trump's message late today, declaring 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico will go into effect at midnight. What the president is now saying and what legendary investor Warren Buffett is now saying about tariffs. Tonight, after the world witnessed that showdown in the Oval Office, what President Zelensky is now saying about the mineral deal with the U.S. And our Rachel Scott asking President Trump what it would take to make this deal happen after all with President Zelensky. And tonight, the Kremlin is pleased with what it's seeing, saying President Trump's foreign policy vision largely aligns with theirs. After the plane crash into the Potomac here in Washington and those warnings right beforehand, the Black Hawk too close to the passenger jet, there is news tonight there have been multiple warnings since. Passenger jet pilots coming into D.C., but those pilots say there isn't other aircraft nearby. So what's happening? Why the alerts? And is this system working? Overseas tonight, the driver plowing into pedestrians at a carnival, the deadly attack, the third such attack in less than 3 months. Tonight, there is news coming in on Pope Francis now, a disturbing setback. Terry Moran live at the Vatican. Back here in the U.S., the urgent search for a missing 2-year-old boy. The scare at Boston's Logan Airport, a passenger stung by a scorpion while retrieving her luggage. And a night of history at the Oscars right here on ABC. The show starting off on a high note, and the surprises right until the end. From ABC News, this is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir, reporting tonight from Washington, D.C. Good evening tonight from Washington. We are here.
Tonight, stocks tumble as all sides dig in for a rising trade war. The markets sell off with the midnight deadline just hours away. The president threatens Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs. Will he go through with it? And why it could raise the price of new cars by thousands of dollars. Winter wildfires, the state of emergency in the Carolinas as people are forced to evacuate their homes near Myrtle Beach. The sky is red with fire, giant columns of smoke in the air. The rush to contain California tonight as new fires pop up. Plus, the major news storm threatening Mardi Gras and millions across the country. The deep chill with Ukraine as President Zelensky warns a peace deal could be very, very, very far away. In the aftermath of an Oval Office blow-up, the concern about Trump's relations with Putin, why European leaders are preparing for the worst. Another driver goes at high speed into a crowd in Germany. What we know, false alarms. Pilots in Washington airspace get false warnings just a month after that mid-air collision. Let's see some ID. The big change coming to licenses and how you fly soon, but millions aren't ready. And finally, behind the lens with a photographer whose images from Saturday Night Live are as iconic as the sketches themselves.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Here come the tariffs. Good evening, I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois. President Trump is making it more expensive for Mexico and Canada to get their products through America's front door, and that could increase the cost of the packages left on your front porch.
At a time when 3 out of 4 Americans are telling CBS News their incomes are not keeping up with inflation. At a minute past midnight, a 25% tax takes effect on imports from America's closest and biggest trading partners.
The announcement had investors running for the exits. NVIDIA, GM, and Amazon led a sell-off that saw the Dow plunge nearly 1.5%, the NASDAQ more than 2.5%, and the S&P 1.75%.
Weijia Zhang is at the White House. Weijia?
Well, President Trump says Canada and Mexico must face those tariffs because they have failed to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. And for the same reason, he's bumping up the fee on Chinese imports. Tonight, economists warn this could spark a trade war that will cost consumers. After following through on his threat,
the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
President Trump says there's a simple solution for countries that want to avoid tariffs.
What they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
To make his point today, Trump hosted the CEO of a Taiwanese semiconductor chip manufacturing company who pledged to invest $100 billion in new manufacturing plants in the U.S. And the president said Japanese automaker Honda has ditched its plan to open a new plant in Mexico, opting instead for Indiana to avoid tariffs. But auto prices are still likely to increase. One study found a large SUV with parts from Mexico could jump $9,000.
Trade wars are costly and nobody wins.
Josh Lipsky is a former State Department official.
Trump argues that we're going to slap all these extra fees on imports. So then everyone's just going to buy America, and that'll be great for American manufacturing, American companies. But doesn't that take time?
That doesn't happen overnight. That could take years. And in the meantime, there's huge cost of transition.
Another recent study estimates the new tariffs could cost the average U.S. family more than $1,200.
All right, we continue tonight from Washington, D.C. Here is part 2 of my exclusive interview with the Vice President, J.D. Vance.
Every time he talks about tariffs, I'm like, is the media and Democrats that ignorant? Have you not figured out that means, let's negotiate?
Exactly.
And they seem not to want to understand that part of them. You said at the Munich Security Conference, and I want to quote it directly, biggest threat to Europe is not Russia or China. You talked about the retreat of Europe from fundamental values. The threat is from within.
Yes.
And you went on to talk about digital censorship and canceling elections. That was a powerful condemnation of what is really happening there.
I appreciate it. And it's also, by the way, Sean, a condemnation of what the Biden administration was doing. This is one of the things that I think the Europeans didn't appreciate about the speech is the biggest driver of mass censorship in the last 5 years. It actually wasn't the Europeans. They were the victims of it in a lot of ways. It was coming from the Biden administration. This whole crazy left-wing idea that we're not allowed to debate ideas, that we're not allowed to discuss things, that we have to silence people, censor them, throw them in jail for silently praying outside of an abortion clinic. These ideas are going to destroy Western civilization. They're going to destroy Europe, and they would destroy the United States of America if we allow them to fester. Thank God we have a president now who believes in free speech, but the danger is still there. The danger is there in Europe. The danger is there in the United States of America. We have to ask ourselves the questions as leaders. Are we willing to defend people even if we disagree with what they say? If you're not willing to do that, I don't think you're fit to lead Europe or the United States of America.
If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you.
Exactly right.
You said it at the same conference.
That's exactly right. There's nothing that we can do for you if you're terrified of your own people. And Sean, you see this every single day. What are some of the biggest drivers of violence in these European societies? It's mass migration. It's people who haven't assimilated into European societies, who are driving cars into Christmas festivals, killing tons of innocent people. And very often, the European response to that is not to say, oh, well, maybe we should get control of our own borders. The response is to try to silence and shut down their own citizenry. That is a danger in Europe. It was a danger under Joe Biden in the United States of America. And look, of course, China is a major threat. It's a major competitor over the next few years, over the next few decades. But I have no doubt that America and Europe can take on whatever threats so long as we're strong internally.
On this Monday night, Canada just out away from being hit with those hefty U.S. tariffs. How the American president is trying to spin the plan.
It's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country.
And how Canada intends to strike back.
We are ready.
Paving a path to peace. The UK's 4-point plan to help Ukraine and what Canada may end up doing. 3 earthquakes in 2 weeks. How southern BC has been rattled again. And the film that dominated the Oscars.
You're so classy.
The Canadians contributing to the success of Anora.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining.
And emergencies, Swiss politics and finance.
John Zaracostas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello and a very warm welcome to you. You're watching Daybreak here on France 24. These are our headlines. The US suspends its military aid to Ukraine. Washington saying that President Volodymyr Zelensky needs to prove he wants peace, and saying that the best security guarantee of Americans an economic upside in Ukraine. That minerals deal then still on the table. We will be crossing live to our correspondent Fraser Jackson in Washington to get the latest. Meanwhile, the 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico to the United States comes into effect. Canada's Justin Trudeau says that they will put the same tax on US books there. Arabs meet to find a reconstruction that not mean roofing Palestine from US aid to Ukraine has been suspended.
Emergencies and Swiss politics and finance.
John Zaracostas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Hello and a very warm welcome to you. You're watching Daybreak here on France 24. These are our headlines. The US suspends its military aid to Ukraine. Washington saying that President Volodymyr Zelensky needs to prove he wants peace, and saying that the best security guarantee is to give Americans an economic upside in Ukraine. That minerals deal then still on the table. We will be crossing live to our correspondent Fraser Jackson in Washington to get the latest. Meanwhile, the 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico to the United States comes into effect. Canada's Justin Trudeau says that they will put the same tax on US products there. China also getting hit with another 10% hike on taxes for its goods going to the US. And Arab leaders meet to find a plan for the reconstruction of Gaza that does not mean removing Palestinians from their land. Land largely destroyed by that war. The summit comes as the ceasefire looks increasingly fragile, with Israel still blocking any aid from getting in.
This is Asia Now.
It's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 New Delhi, and 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Rani Samtani. At this hour, geopolitical challenges and economic headwinds set the stage for China's most important political meetings of the year. Trade, tech, and growth top the agenda as officials gather in Beijing. China vowing countermeasures as the U.S. forges ahead with new tariffs. Canada and Mexico also planning to retaliate. The duties come into effect today, sparking renewed fears of multiple trade wars. And President Donald Trump halts all U.S. military aid to Ukraine, stepping up pressure on Volodymyr Zelensky. The two leaders clashed in a heated Oval Office meeting just days earlier.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. No decision from Donald Trump on suspending military aid to Ukraine as the president renews his attack on Volodymyr Zelensky.
He thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
The president softens his anti-European rhetoric, calling its leaders good people, as Keir Starmer says Mr. Trump is sincere about peace. As the war rages on, we speak to the Ukrainian drone unit that commanders say is striking at the heart of Russia's war machine.
Secret attacks like this are a key part of the war with Ukraine, sending drones armed with explosives to strike targets deep inside Russia.
Also on the programme tonight, prayers for the Pope after the Vatican reveals tonight he'd suffered 2 new episodes of what it called acute respiratory crises. Time to play chopsticks again as SpaceX prepares for its latest test launch. We'll bring you the build-up to that live. Plus,
I guess Americans are excited to see somebody finally stand up to a powerful Russia.
5-star, we look at the indie filmmaker who took the Oscars by storm last night. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. The images of Donald Trump berating Volodymyr Zelensky in...
Very good evening to you from the newsroom. Straight back to Patrick in just a few moments. First, though, a look at the news tonight. Keir Starmer says Russian President Vladimir Putin feasts on division and that Ukraine's future is vital to UK national security. He told MPs earlier that Russia is a menace in British waters and skies, has carried out cyber attacks on the National Health Service, and even conducted assassination attacks in our streets. The Prime Minister insists Britain will now lead from the front in securing peace for Ukraine after a week of talks with Volodymyr Zelensky, European leaders, and the US President Donald Trump. Well, speaking to us earlier, Dame Priti Patel told us that it's vital Britain now plays a leading role in achieving that peace.
This matters to us as a country. It matters to our own security here domestically. I can't emphasize that enough. Look at who the aggressor is in this conflict. It's Russia. It's the same Russia that committed poisonings in our own country not that long ago. You remember Salisbury? We had politicians in that very chamber that I've sat in this afternoon who would not even acknowledge Russian influence.
Well, tensions between Donald Trump and President Zelensky are still escalating, with the current US president, accusing the Ukrainian leader of not being appreciative of American support. It comes after a heated exchange between the two at the Oval Office, but tonight Trump said he is not considering suspending military aid for now. Zelensky insists Ukraine is counting on the US, describing peace as the country's highest priority. It comes as talks with international partners are ongoing, with more steps expected soon. At least 2 people are dead and several others seriously injured after a car drove into crowds in the German city of Mannheim. Police say the suspect, a 40-year-old German man, deliberately rammed pedestrians in a busy square before shooting himself. He survived and is now in hospital, with prosecutors saying he's showing signs of mental illness. Investigators have, though, ruled out an extremist motive, but Germany's interior minister says it is the latest in a series of crimes where vehicles have been used as weapons. Mannheim's hospital remains on high alert, with 8 trauma teams treating the injured. An inquiry into the deadliest channel crossing in UK history has heard that despite multiple distress calls, no rescue came for those on board. At least 27 died when the inflatable boat capsized in November 2021, including women and children. The first distress call was made by a 16-year-old boy who was told help was on the way. The search crews mistakenly recorded another boat as the vessel in trouble. A cold water expert says most victims likely died over a long period from hypothermia. The Pope has suffered 2 episodes of acute respiratory failure as the Vatican warns he's not out of danger. The 88-year-old's health took a turn for the worse this afternoon after being in hospital for around 2 weeks with a lung infection. Doctors carried out 2 procedures to check his airways while he's now back on a ventilator. The Vatican says Pope Francis remains alert and cooperative, but his prognosis is still uncertain. And the ceasefire in Gaza is on the brink of collapse, with Israel halting humanitarian aid until Hamas accepts a new deal. The proposal, backed by the US, would extend the truce by 50 days during Ramadan and Passover in exchange for half the remaining hostages. Hamas says Israel is trying to avoid talks as pressure grows from the UN to resume aid. For those hostages still held in Gaza, reports describe severe hunger, some surviving on just a small bowl of rice a day, while protests in Israel intensify to bring them home. Both sides say they're preparing to resume fighting while weighing their options for peace. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with a full roundup of all the top stories at 10 o'clock. Now though, it's back to Patrick.
Africa News. The news.
A mission from the West African regional bloc ECOWAS has left Guinea-Bissau after the president threatened to expel it. The team was sent to the country last month to help it reach a political consensus on how to conduct elections this year. It said it had prepared a draft agreement on a roadmap for elections and had started presenting it to stakeholders for their consent. But they decided to leave early on Saturday morning after President Umaru Sissoco Embalo's threat. The president has not responded to the bloc's accusation. There's been heightened tension in the country over when Embalo's 5-year mandate ends. The opposition says his term as president expired last week, but the Supreme Court of Justice ruled that it ends on the 4th of September. A new round of general elections was due to take place last November, but Embalo postponed them and has since announced they'll take place on the 30th of November this year. The opposition has opposed the delay. ECOWAS says it will now present its report to the bloc's president, including a proposal for an agreement leading to inclusive and peaceful elections.
Farmers in South Sudan are embracing a unique climate-resistant coffee variety in hopes of revitalizing the nation's agricultural sector. As climate change poses significant challenges to global coffee production, the lesser-known Excelsa bean may provide a viable solution. In Zara County, coffee farms are at the forefront of efforts to revive the previously stagnant coffee industry. I am very pleased with my coffee. I would like to jump and touch the branches of the trees out of joy. Those who haven't planted, be strong and plant like me. Once you plant, take good care of it and protect it from fire. I have taken care of my coffee and it hasn't been harmed by fire. Excelsa has been cultivated in the region for over 100 years, but its potential is just beginning to be acknowledged. Ian Peterson, Managing Director of Equatorial Teak, aims to link coffee farmers with global markets.
As we feel that this coffee is climate resistant, we think it would be a great thing for South Sudan to explore further. I think there's lots of opportunities here to help the coffee industry as climate changes in the future.
The local coffee market is thriving as traders sell coffee alongside other products. This local production and sales effort received backing from community leaders such as Atoro Bapeni, the king of Azande.
We can't encourage our people to depend on other things, on other people. Like now, most of our people, they depend on the government to get salary, and once salary delays, that means they will not be able to sustain themselves.
Excelsa, despite representing less than 1% of the global market, could potentially stabilize the struggling coffee industry in South Sudan, offering a promising opportunity for a more sustainable and resilient future.
Humanitarian aid trucks bound for Gaza were turned back to Egypt on Sunday after Israel halted all food and supply deliveries, despite tensions over a fragile ceasefire. Israel warned of additional consequences if Hamas failed to accept a new truce extension, while Egypt accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon.
Regarding
the second phase, as I mentioned, each party must implement its obligations, and an agreement has been signed. This agreement must be implemented and includes the full flow of aid. The use of aid as a weapon of collective punishment and starvation cannot, or should not be allowed or accepted. This is completely unacceptable and represents a flagrant and explicit violation of international humanitarian law. The ceasefire's first phase, which began on January 19, saw a surge in aid deliveries. The second phase is meant to secure the release of remaining hostages in exchange for an Israeli withdrawal and a permanent ceasefire, but negotiations have stalled. The International Committee of Red Cross warned that unraveling the ceasefire could push Gaza's population of over 2 million back into crisis. Meanwhile, UN humanitarian chief called Israel's decision alarming, while MSF condemned it as unacceptable.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arriving in a Tel Aviv court on Monday as his long-running trial for alleged corruption resumed. He's answering to charges of fraud, breach of trust and accepting bribes in 3 separate cases, becoming the first sitting leader to take the stand as a criminal defendant in Israel's history. Netanyahu denies any wrongdoing, describing the accusations as fake. The 3 corruption cases were first filed against him in 2019, and the trial began in May 2020. The testimony is yet another low point for Netanyahu, who's the country's longest-serving leader. He also faces an international arrest warrant for alleged war crimes in Israel's war against Hamas. Meanwhile, more than 2,000 people took to the streets of Jerusalem on Sunday night, calling for an end to the war and a deal to release all hostages still in Gaza. Critics accuse Netanyahu of extending Israel's offensive in the enclave to avoid facing the trial and maintain his stay in power.
Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Leaders in Europe held an emergency summit in London Sunday, 2 days after an unprecedented clash at the White House between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and both President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. Zelensky had traveled to the White House to sign a deal giving the United States partial control over Ukraine's raw earth minerals, but the deal imploded following a dramatic televised Oval Office meeting where Trump accused Zelensky of gambling with World War III after Zelensky insisted Ukraine could only back a Russia peace deal if it included security guarantees from the United States. The news conference ended with Trump and J.D. Vance openly criticizing Zelensky.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't have your playing cards.
Mr. President.
I'm
very serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
With all respect to you.
Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No,
even today.
You said thank you.
Even today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Shortly after this exchange, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz asked Zelensky to leave the White House. Trump's treatment of Zelensky shocked many in Washington and around the world.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shekel 5858. I am Amir Shekel. Have a good life. Bye-bye.